I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Why does it always do that to me? Citizens of the internet, welcome to another exciting episode of the Politics Show, and thank you for joining me. So I just want to start by atoning a little bit, because I haven't been defending the Trump. You like this new angle? You realize how sideways my glasses are. I have been defending the Trump regime. Not defending. I shouldn't say defending, because I didn't vote for Trump. And I've never been a Trump defender, per se. But what I have done is kind of be deferential and kind of say, hey, you know, a lot of people are saying that this and that, and I'm just going to wait things out until, you know, I see how they pan out, because you know how the media is. The media is full of shit. And so I kind of approached the situation like that. And then this past weekend happened. And, you know, sure, you could argue it was a little bit more surgical than, say, staying in a country for 4 years or whatever, but just going into another country and arresting their president, it's not what anyone signed up for. It's not what anyone voted for. And I don't think, again, here's what I will say in Trump's defense, and we'll get into some of the nuance of this in a minute, but I do think that this is something that has been years in the making and was more than likely started way before he got elected a second time. And I have some other people saying that, but I saw a lot of people reacting, saying things about, oh, if you supported this guy as anti-war, you're a piece of shit, and people dunking on people who voted for Trump. And I just have to reiterate, most people are making most people that said, hey, Trump's probably the lesser of two evils, people like Dave Smith as one example. They didn't do it because they were like full-throated Trump supporters. They did it because that's how our system works. And in all actuality, it is the lesser of two evils, because Kamala Harris would have done the same thing in some way or another. And if it hadn't been Trump that did it, a lot of the usual suspects who are upset at, you know, these people, these Dave Smiths, and for, you know, supporting Trump or whatever, they would be attacking Kamala Harris for doing the same thing, but they wouldn't be attacking these people. And it's like blaming, you know, an artist for something that a random fan said at their show, right? Like, we did this thing recently about Pantera, where it was back in the 90s, they were trying to accuse Pantera of being a racist band. And, you know, don't at me. There's plenty of evidence that they've done racist shit, or, you know, Dimebag said the N-word or whatever. But the whole thing was, you know, people will just take this and run with it. And as part of the report, part of the evidence that MTV showed was they went to, like, ran the camera through a Pantera line, and one kid goes, "White power." It's like, so then they're, you know, approaching the band and like, what do you have to say when people when your fans say white power? And they're like, what should I say? Like, I don't control them. They're not me. They're people that came to our show. That doesn't mean they represent every value I have or stand. You know what I mean? So I think it's kind of like with politics, it's much more easy to make this emotional connection, you know. And I'm not going to name names, but I saw people on Twitter like, you know who you are if you supported Trump or said he was anti-war. Well, you know, I don't, again, I said this last time, but it's like pulling the brakes on a speeding locomotive. It's this thing that has all this force and momentum behind it, the deep state. And the idea that one guy's just going to get in and pull the brakes and everything's going to be rainbows and puppies is a little bit ridiculous on its own. And that's been my argument, I think, the whole time with Trump. And that argument is, sure, he's a scumbag, he's a piece of shit, just like the rest of them. But there's clearly enough of the establishment that hates him that it's worth a shot to get him in there. And again, he has that kind of assholishness about him and the resources and the network to do political upheaval in a way that Bernie Sanders did not. You know, you see how easy any of these Democrats throughout history, look at Howard Dean, look at, John Edwards. I don't know if you remember John Edwards, but as soon as that guy got close to a Democratic nomination, bam, sex scandal. You know what I mean? He was cheating on his dying wife who had cancer, who probably wasn't having sex at all. And that's a part of the political dialogue that a lot of people neglect to understand, is that sexual release for men is a biological necessity, to the point where we will bust one in our sleep. I was trying to get the term as PC as possible without saying, like, there's so many pornographic terms. I was trying to make it an unpornographic. Bust one. I think that works, right? It's to the point that a guy will bust one in his sleep if he's not getting laid or, relieving himself in that department. So, sex scandals, and I've gone over this many times, are kind of like a non-starter for me, unless it's something that's illegal. And even in that case, if it's like he solicited prostitution, who cares? Tale as old as the Bible, So anyway, let's get it started today with your boy Alex Christoforou from. He has a couple of, and today I did things a little bit different. I got some notes here. So let me bust out my notes here. He has a couple different takes I want to share with you. And I love these guys' show. I love his personal stream mostly because he I don't need to. Sorry, my computer's asking me if it wants to record my screen, and I don't think that's necessary. So check this out. Here we go. This is.
But we can't take a chance after having done this incredible thing last night of letting somebody else take over, where we have to do it again. We can do it again, too. Nobody can stop us. There's nobody that has the capability that we have. When I watch that war in Russia going on and on and on, and everybody dying, and it's like, it's primitive. It's primitive. It's horrible.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust for a long period of time.
I speak Trump. So what I think he's saying there about the Russia thing, sorry. It's primitive. It's been going on for a long time. I think he's trying to make himself look good by saying, hey, at least my wars are short and quick, And I did see some arguments about that from the conservative, media ecosystem, like, oh, well, Trump's wars are quick and painless rather than 20 years or whatever. And it's like, yeah, maybe the framing is a little bit, yeah. It's okay, bro. Like I said last week, Trump had a lot of people fooled with the peace president. It's not even that he had us fooled per se. It's just that he was a wild card. I think with a lot of the neocons, if Ted Cruz came out suddenly and was like, I'm for peace, you'd be like, what the fuck? No, you're not. But with Trump, it was a little bit of a wild card, so you could kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, And again, I think despite all this, he still was the lesser of the two evils. Because if Kamala had won that election, we would still be having this exact same conversation, it would just be under the guise of like, yay, girl power. Look what our girl president did. She went in and took out an evil dictator. Yay. You know, whereas now it's kind of like, oh, the American like pig nose has been fully revealed now. You know, not that it hadn't before, but that's one of the things I've always said about Trump too, that I like about him, is Americans have this delusion about who we are. You know, we have no self-reflection or kind of like self-awareness on the world stage, and Trump is how we look to the rest of the world, basically. Just a piggish, like misogynist, money obsessed, you know, I'll do what I want, like Cartman from South Park, you know, just a complete disaster. But by the same token, as I've said, you need that kind of a personality if you're going to do a political upheaval, because we've seen how far the left gets, and then they just end up folding into the, you know, fascist with flowery language party. But let me get on with this here.
They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world.
See, and another quick sidebar about the Trump era here is, back in the like George Bush days, they kind of tried to like hide things under the guise of like, we're so good. But like then when Trump came in, I think they went like, oh, you can just do this like naked corporatism out in public and there's no real consequences. Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing another byproduct of this that I think is good is we're seeing how a lot of the MAGA people, a large percentage of them, have integrity and are like, no, fuck you. This is not what I voted for. And it's kind of like, that's what upsets me about this, the people that are like, you pieces of shit that supported Trump, you're garbage. And look, we told you this was going to happen. It's like, yeah, we knew this was going to happen. My Trump supporting cousin, who I always talk about, that changed my mind on a lot of political issues, he said it best. He said, look, we know that this guy's a con artist, but he's not another Bush. He's not another Clinton. And it's kind of like, you got to respect that. It's like the liberals want to act like the Trump people are just dummies who don't know any better. Like, you're just dumb. You just don't know what you did. You ruined America. And the reality is, no, the Trump people know exactly who Trump is and have known a long time. But the fact that it makes the entrenched people lose their minds is the best part of it at this point, because he's clearly just another one of the entrenched people. There's a lot of good stuff in this, though, so I should shut up and let this run.
The world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
This is my video update on this Sunday afternoon, January the 4th, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news, Mr. Bean. And let's start things off with Venezuela. Actually, the whole video is going to be on Venezuela because there is a lot to get to. And we will start with Trump's statements following the capture of Maduro, following the kidnapping of Maduro. So Trump, he said that the U.S. will be involved in Venezuela. They are going to run the show in Venezuela. They are going to govern Venezuela for as long as it takes, and they're going to to put together some sort of a transitional government, but they're going to basically run the show. They're going to be very much involved in the running of Venezuela. And they're also going to take the oil. Yep, they are going to take the oil. The big U.S. oil companies.
Yeah, we knew that.
Are going to come into Venezuela, and they're going to fix up, according to Trump, about how this operation was not like what's happening with Russia or the Russian military. Their operation is primitive, and
so I wanted to discuss this with you for a minute, because again, this is one of those things where I feel like America really underestimates its adversaries. And honestly, I don't even think Russia should be an adversary. China either. Maybe an economic competitor, but like militarily, China's not trying to attack us. You know, they can just sit back from afar and watch us implode, if we're being honest. But he gets into a little bit more detail about Trump kind of poking fun at Putin as if, and I think what's dangerous about this too is I don't think that Putin is slow rolling this because he can't just go in there and destroy the entire country. I think he's being restrained on purpose. I think he's intentionally showing restraint so as not to like rouse too much ire. You know, he's being surgical, something the U.S. could honestly learn from. But let me let homeboy finish here.
The operation with Maduro, the special military operation against Maduro, was nothing ever seen before in the history of the world. And what Russia is doing is, with the conflict in Ukraine, is taking forever. It's slow and it's very primitive. So he said that as well. Fitting for this video, I guess. He also said that Machado has no support, no respect, and no support. So she's not going to be the puppet leader, which is an interesting statement from Trump, because the narrative coming out of the West is that Machado and I believe his name is Gonzalez, Edmundo Gonzalez, or Rodrigo Gonzalez, I forgot who was with Machado running against Maduro in the last elections. I know I have it bookmarked. Give me 1 minute.
All right, let me jump up here.
Edmundo Gonzalez. Right. So the narrative was that the last elections were stolen by Maduro, and all the popular support was with Machado and Gonzalez. And then Trump makes the admission that Machado is not popular at all. She has no respect and no support.
So there you go. That's the point I wanted to get to right there. What they're admitting about their Nobel Peace Prize winner now is that no one likes her and no one respects her, so they can't just put her in as the president. It's not. And it's so funny thinking back, because they tried this with Guaido a couple years ago and it didn't work. And so then they tried to pull the the election results are invalid shit because our guy didn't get in. Our CIA plant guy didn't get into the presidential position there. And you know, this is what the US has been doing from the beginning of the Obama era and beyond, is just doing these regime change, color revolution type things in these different countries. And most people are wise to it now. And a country like Venezuela has a lot on the line. But as you're going to see, the more we get into this, the real issue isn't drugs. It isn't even oil. It's Venezuela working with our adversaries. It's Venezuela supplying oil to countries like China and Russia, and even like other trade opportunities. That, I think, is why they're doing this. They're like, no, you can't trade with China and Russia. You have to do what our, oil people say, which is just, we would be and this is the thing that always baffles me about this, and then I'll keep moving here. But if the goal of the United States was really to like be this ultimately powerful, omnipresent country that runs the world, we would be so much better served by, living our values. You know what I mean? And that's, to me, is why it's clear that this is not about anything but money for donors who now have the levers of power. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, again, to reiterate, if the goal here was really to make the United States the top superpower forever and ever that ran the world, we would do it ethically and, like I said, live our values. Instead, you can see this dynamic with Ukraine and Venezuela, where, okay, Putin goes into this country really to defend his borders from people that are shelling, this war that's like literally breaking out on his border. And the United States and Europe's like, nope, yeah, it's an illegal invasion, da da da. But when the United States just goes into their country, surrounds this country for no valid reason, there's literally no valid reason whatsoever that they have other than we're going to just go rob these people. And a lot of the conservative talkers are admitting that. But the same level of rules don't apply. So the rules-based order is really just like, do what I say, not what I do, which is, the kind of thing that really low IQ parents do with their kids. Or, and how does that turn out? Sorry, I had to untangle my balls there. How does that turn out in the end? Never good.
Oopsie from Trump, right? There goes that narrative of Maduro stealing the elections in Venezuela. So he said that about Machado, and most likely she will end up being a type of vice president. At least that's what the experts are saying, the analyst experts.
In there somehow.
It'll be Gonzalez and then Machado, or perhaps Trump is going to stay with Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president, and now she is the acting president of Venezuela. And she is saying that she's going to stay loyal to Maduro. That's what her early statements are saying. She will remain loyal to Maduro, loyal to his government. She is calling on the Trump administration to release and return Maduro, like that's going to happen. That's not going to happen. China is also demanding that the Trump administration release and return Maduro. That's not going to happen.
And see, someone asked this, I think, in one of these videos, but it's disappointing that there's never any actual resistance to this kind of stuff. Just to go back here too, I want to show this one more time. So this is what Trump had to say about Russia, and I think that we hold this belief at our own risk, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. Listen to this.
But we can't take a chance after having done this incredible thing last night of letting somebody else take over, where we have to do it again. We can do it again too. Nobody can stop us. There's nobody that has the capability that we have. When I watch that war in Russia going on and on and on, and everybody dying, and it's like it's primitive. It's primitive. It's horrible.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela.
So there you go. And again, that's one thing about Trump. Love him or hate him, you got to give him credit for at least, being bullish enough to just kind of like tell it like it is to some degree, and a lot of the Trump supporters got shit for saying he tells it like it is. I'm not saying that he's honest, but he doesn't really beat around the bush with stuff like that. And, it's I guess better than being a complete liar. So this is the proof. I want to show this again because this is Tim Dillon showing these ICBM missiles that Russia just deployed in Ukraine recently, at the end of 2024, about a year ago, actually. And this is why I think it's very stupid of us to view Russia as primitive. Hold on a second. I just realized I was sharing. Let me share this iPhone up there.
E-card for Thanksgiving. Take a look.
Can you play non-copyrighted holiday music while this happens?
Yeah, I'll put it up on YouTube.
Because I think it's about attitude, and I think it's about the way we present something. I don't think it's about the raw facts. I think it's all the way you look at it. Perspective is reality. Is there a way to make Russia firing an ICBM? Can we make it feel jolly? Can we make it feel nice? Do we have to focus on the negative aspects of it? You know, I mean, listen, remember when they were running articles in New York Times going, you know, nuclear war has some benefits and maybe everybody should get over their fear of nuclear war. And we're going to pull that article up in a minute, but they're genuinely sick people who are saying, well, nuclear war maybe wouldn't be the worst thing. So here we're going to play a little non-copyrighted Christmas music. Ooh, I like that. Now get the ICBM up. Well, this is nice. Now it feels like the Christmas show. This doesn't scare me anymore. It feels like a light show for the holidays. Keep playing that missile. I like this missile. This is a holiday missile. This is not a bad missile at all. What if they did it and it lit up the sky with like Frosty the Snowman? It's all about the way you look at it, folks. Nuclear war is a good reset. I think people in this country have decided in small rooms or in forests or wherever they meet and talk that nuclear war is actually a nice reset. It might get
So there you go, Tim Dillon. Illustrating why Russia should not be underestimated. My friends, do not underestimate.
Yo, we here now. Stupid.
We got Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president who's now serving as active president, claims her father was tortured to death by a CIA-backed Venezuelan regime led by the same families behind Machado. It's much like with Cuba. This is an ongoing thing, it seems like, where the U.S. is like, no. We get to choose who runs your country. And the people are like, no, you don't, U.S. We want to share our natural resources, and we're not going to let you neocons come in with your greedy pig-ass companies and take that from us. Yeah, we're fine to share some of it with you or sell some of it to you, but this is just the recurring pattern for the corporate dick piggery of the United States. And listen, I'm not anti-capitalist. I have to say this as a disclaimer. I've never been anti-capitalist, but what we have currently is not capitalism. It's oligarchy. So there's capitalism, much like democracy, needs checks and balances that it does not currently have. It owns the fucking system. It owns the courts. It owns the political process. And now it owns the internet. I mean, the internet, though, as it's a communication tool. I think it's impossible to ever completely own communication, and I don't want to get sidebarred here. Let me continue down this road for you with Alex here.
Regime led by the same families behind Machado. So that's an interesting fact right there. So the acting president's father was tortured by the Machado, the families behind the Nobel Prize winner Machado. We're getting information from the New York Times that the CIA had officers in Venezuela as early as August. That's ridiculous. That's a joke. The CIA has had officers in Venezuela forever. But the operation in Venezuela, I'm sure was put into motion a year ago, maybe even during Biden's presidency. They started to put all of this together, this operation to capture and remove Maduro or decapitate Maduro.
So I want to show you another piece of interesting evidence here, because this implicates something. I'm gonna make some connections here for you. All right, check this out.
Lindsey Graham was so happy. So happy, Lindsey Graham.
I hope you bad guys are hiding. Lindsey Graham.
He posted on X, to my Chinese friends, in case you were planning to follow up with Maduro, he has a new address. It will be difficult to schedule another appointment, but I know he means a lot to you. Good luck. Oh, by the way, quit propping up narco-terrorist dictators like Maduro.
And that right there, this is exactly what triggered this. because I don't know if you saw this. You probably did if you're paying attention. But there were Chinese envoys in Venezuela the day before they did this. So was Venezuela trying to recruit backup? Were they? It just speaks to my argument that this is more about controlling the flow of oil to countries we don't like than anything else. I mean, the money too. The bonus is that all these companies see that's how the state and these companies have always worked together too. They're like, well, we have to do this for the good of humanity because America is the best, and we have the right to control everything. That's been this country's kind of existence. And again, I just feel like if we really wanted to rule the world, we should live our values, because we would have a lot more power and moral kind of prescience and weight in the world if we didn't do this kind of shit on behalf of pigs. But let Homeboy continue here.
Quit buying oil from Putin that is keeping his war machine flush with cash, and reconsider propping up the Ayatollah in Iran, a religious NAZI, by buying his oil. China has aligned itself with every bad actor on the planet, keeping conflict ablaze. It's time they pay a price for the chaos they are sowing. So there you have it, guys. In this one tweet, Lindsey Graham lays out the plan. He lays it out there.
Right.
If China and Russia do not take this warning seriously from Lindsey Graham and Iran, if they do not heed this warning.
I do declare, Putin, you can't be buying oil from Venezuela anymore. It's clear that a person like Lindsey Graham gets off on this kind of power, and that's why he's there, because he's such a weak person in reality, but I digress. I wanted to show you this because I think this also kind of sums up the situation. This is an updated version of the ever-present Republicans and Democrats meeting. And for this Republican, they both have, this is so good, look at this. Both have the flag of our most loyal ally. And this one has a cross, this one has a rainbow flag, this one has a CPAC, this one has a Yes We Can, this one has Project 2025, this one has, this is excellent update. I don't know who did this. It was Gareth Icky here who shared it out, though. But let's get back to Alex here.
From Lindsey Graham, well, then what can you say? What can you say? They have been warned by Lindsey Graham. They've been warned by everybody, Russia, China, Iran. But Lindsey Graham lays it all out there in this one post. Iran is next. They've got the asymmetric war set up for Project Ukraine. So that's being said.
Now, I want to put this in context right now, real quick. I want to put this into the context of American politics, because if you're anti-war, both parties are, as we just showed, pro-war. But there are new, kind of upstarts and grassroots people coming on the scene. I got to fix my glasses. They're so. Something's wrong there. Anyway, and one of those people is this dude, Graham Plattner. And I don't know, there was a whole thing with this guy, where the left freaked out, and he was accused of racism and called a Nazi and all this stuff. And you if you don't understand how this game works now, I feel bad for you, because let me show you this real quick. And I'm showing you this to kind of illustrate what the difference is between the parties right now. But people like Graham exist on the right, obviously, the Candace Owens and Tucker Carlsons. But check this out. He says, bullshit, this never worked. I watched my friends die in Iraq in the wake of speeches like this one. Trump on Venezuela, we're going to run the country until such a time as we can do a safe and proper judicious transition. And this guy, Plattner here, that's not exactly the best. That's a little bit better view of that. But here,
Run the country until such time as we.
You don't need to hear that, I already read it. So what I wanted to say here, though, is as soon as this guy got anywhere near, becoming a nominee, look what got dragged out. He's a Nazi. He's a racist. And I hope, lefties, that you can see how your goodwill is weaponized against you in situations like this. And I hope you can see how organized of an effort this is and the lobby that's behind it. Because he's anti-war, anti-Semite. Anti-war immediately equals anti-Semite with these lobbies. And so, it really disappointed me that a lot of, I think really intelligent people on the left bought into the smears on this guy because he said racist stuff in a secret Reddit fucking group 20 years ago. And so now they're like, oh, we got to cancel him from the Democratic Party. And it's that kind of intellectual just fragility that has ruined the left and just made it a non-existent thing. I mean, the Democratic Party, I believe, is completely dead at this point. I don't even know if it's worth Graham's time to run. If he doesn't make it into the Democratic primary, he should run as an independent, and he'll probably beat the Democratic candidate because people are hungry for something that isn't one of the two bullshit parties dropping bombs. And Trump, it's disappointing that he ran against this shit. That's how he got in there. But like I said earlier, unlike a lot of other people with political histories, he was a wild card. A lot of people went, okay, well, we know that, insert stock Republican here will start wars like all the neocons do. We know that insert stock Democrat here will start neocon wars under the guise of, yay, trans rights and women, girl power, We know all that. But with Trump, it was a little bit of a wild card. So you can't really hate people for going down that road with him, myself included. So this is just a little bit more from this. This is the next phase in their project. And we'll just touch on this briefly. But check this out. This is...
use all of the Trump administration. She posted a map of Greenland in the red, white, and blue. So we know what's coming next. That'll be easy. Greenland will be really easy. Yeah, Denmark's going to complain. Yeah. The EU's going to complain. They'll whine and they'll complain.
I love Alex. He just called them all pussies. He's like, that'll be easy. That'll be Canadians, the fucking Europeans, they ain't gonna do shit. They'll do whatever the US says.
International law and allies and partners and blah, 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 blah. And Trump's just going to take Greenland. And once he takes Greenland, then he moves closer to Europe, right? And then he could really, really push the Europeans towards Russia as they ramp up for a conflict with Russia. So the United States will be in Greenland. They can really push the Europeans, supply the Europeans from Greenland. Brian Berletic has gone over this on the new Atlas.
Wow.
And they've got the Arctic and all of that, but basically they'll be right there to supply and push the Europeans forward.
I have to say this because I'm just thinking about. I showed you those missiles that Tim Dillon made the holiday meme about and everything, but I think I saw a lot of people, myself included, on Twitter when this most recent U.S. oligarchy-driven war broke out, saying, "I'm Team Venezuela," and I think that that's really the attitude a lot of people have now, which is kind of sad because how can you not feel it at this point? We at every turn, we the people have tried to stop this. We've tried to vote, short of burning down the White House, and that's I'm not advising that, I'm not calling for that. I'm just saying, the people of the United States have expressed time and time and time again that they do not want this type of thing. But it doesn't matter, And so what do you do in that case? And that's another argument I would make on behalf of the Trump people is it's at the very least, he was maybe a monkey wrench into those gears, maybe. And, obviously now we're finding out he's not. But when you're in a hopeless situation, there are only hopeless answers, So it's kind of well, let's try this one.
To a smash with Russia. So Greenland will be very important for the United States. That's what's next. Greenland, the Telegraph has an article with the title, Venezuela attack strengthens Trump against his real enemy, China. Seizing Maduro is risky, but sends a clear message about U.S. might and potentially secures vast oil reserves.
See, and this is another point of reference here that backs up what I was saying earlier. They're not even hiding it. You know, this is what it's about. It's about controlling oil and trade in the hemisphere. I mean, they've kind of stated that. So I did want to jump up to one more little thing here before we move on to our next piece of video. And that is this. We're gonna tie this oligarch empire scheme to another oligarch empire scheme.
And they've got their pieces in place to continue to do that. As they dangle the mediation, the negotiations for Putin, they're going to be dangling the rapprochement for Putin. Dmitriev in Miami, Witkoff in Moscow, they'll continue to dangle that in front of Putin. A 20-point peace plan, a 30-point peace plan, a 90-point peace plan. I like Putin. I don't like Putin. I like Putin. I'm disappointed at Putin. They'll keep that going for the next year or so.
So he's making a good point here too. Now they're just kind of stringing that thing along and letting it continue ad hoc, you know. And I never really thought about that, but he's making a great point here.
No. But Lindsey Graham laid it all out. He laid it all out there. So Zelensky was asked about Maduro, and Zelensky's comment was, Venezuela, how should we respond to this? Is this how dictators are treated? Then the U.S. knows what to do next.
Okay, this is interesting because my thought about this, going back to what I was saying again about us having any kind of moral high ground or moral authority on the world stage, which we do not. We absolutely have the opposite of that now. This lacks so much self-awareness on Zelensky's part, or this is kind of what, you know, U.S. media does, is projects its flaws or its problems onto the other. But my first thought when I saw what Trump did is like, why can't Putin just do that to Zelensky? And it's almost like they're taunting him at this point, as Alex was saying, where it's like, it's almost like they're forcing him to make a decisive action because, and Putin, I think, has been very measured because he can't win for losing, right? He's trying to negotiate and the Europeans and Zelensky and the Americans are on completely different pages, which works to their advantage. But then if he forcibly just goes, okay, that's it, I'm just going to take the country, I'm just going to move into Kiev and grab everybody and just declare it for Russia, then it becomes, you know, almost a motivator for the people who have kind of been on the sidelines to go, oh, okay, well now it's on because he really took Ukraine, you know. So he's in a tough position with that, and I think, to be honest, he's playing it very, very coy and very maturely, if I do say so, because he, like I said, he clearly has the ability and the technology to wreak some major havoc on Ukraine that he hasn't. And it just seems to me like this is desperation. This is just the dying gasps of an empire that, you know, how can we sustain this? It's crashing down all around us, and like, what can we do to grab Venezuela? I'm having a heart attack. Like, grab. It's kind of pathetic, if I'm being honest. But I'm gonna let him finish.
That was Zelensky's response. The U.S. knows what to do next.
Or Putin does. Like, well, if they can do that, why can't I?
People think that the U.S. is going to go after Zelensky, perhaps. I don't think so. I do not think so. Zelensky was smiling as he said this. He was smiling. Rubio said that Maduro, he likes to play games and thinks nothing will happen. I hope people understand President Trump is not a game player. He wanted to play big boy. If you don't know, now you know. I think this was in reference to Maduro, where Rubio said he liked.
I love how Rubio's like a Gen Xer or something, so he throws in that like hip hop reference. If you don't know, now you know. I'm just throwing that out there, guys. I know who Biggie is. Oh my God. So I want to show you another very informative piece of video. I'm going to start with pieces of video. Your boy Danny Haifong had on a Venezuelan journalist. Imagine that. Talking to someone from Venezuela who might know things about the country he was born and raised in and has a very deep cultural knowledge of. Who'da thunk? I'm sure that the mainstream media is doing this to some degree, but it's probably with people that are on the payroll of the regime change artists, as we've seen. Because here is, I showed you the Democratic response to this. Let me show you what people on the right are saying. Here's Matt Walsh. This is a war for oil, in quotes. First of all, the war lasted like 90 minutes. Second, going to war to secure vital resources for your own people is totally legitimate. Why should we allow some third world communist shithole to control trillions of dollars worth of oil? American exceptionism at its finest. We should be able to have a sovereign country with closed borders and our own resources that caters to our own people, but they can't have it. They're a third world communist shithole. I would defy Matt Walsh to explain to me what a communist is. Most conservatives don't even know, just like most liberals don't know what a Nazi is. They just call everyone a Nazi, and conservatives call everyone a communist. Well, then you have this line of thinking, which is even better. This is Melissa Chen. Here, let me blow this up. I'm sorry. Leftists went from no kings to leave the dictator alone pretty quickly, which is my response to this was, I hope you're getting paid to say things this stupid, because it's just such this kind of lack of context and intentional lack of context and intentional generalization is the thing I think that frustrates me the most about politics, because it's such a massively, massively stupid thing. First of all, no kings was not a leftist thing. It was a completely corporate construct by oligarchs on the Democratic side who, funded Kamala Harris's campaign and are trying to do like a color revolution against Trump. And the other, like, leave the dictator alone is the other thing. The guy was elected, whether you like it or not. And, the U.S. loves to jump in and go like, oh, this is an illegitimate election because our guy, the guy we groomed and put in the election, didn't win. The people can see through our bullshit, and they elected the guy who maybe isn't perfect either. He's maybe their version of Trump, but he's the lesser of two evils. He's at least going to pay respect to the sovereignty and the culture of the country that he rules over, rather than some WEF plant, which is what they've kind of put in Argentina with that absolute, that guy looks like Benny Hill. I forget what that guy's name is. But he reminds me of Benny Hill. If you've ever seen old British comedy, Benny Hill, he's like this bumbling idiot who bumps into things and has naked girls chasing him. It's that's what this guy reminds me of. He's just clearly much like Zelensky, probably an actor that they paid to put in there. But let's get back to Danny Haifong here, and an actual Venezuelan journalist, someone who grew up in the country and understands the nuance. And let's dive into it.
Back to the show.
So
it's your host, Danny Haifong. As you can see,
they talk about the claim that there's a political vacuum now that Maduro's gone, because that's what the U.S. is clearly trying to create, so we can put in someone who will let oil companies rape it. So let's
take over anything. Nothing of that sort is happening. Actually, you're going to see the different, the opposite. You're going to see people actually currently right now, there are demonstrations.
And this guy's name, by the way, is Diego. Hold on a second. Diego Sequeira. Forgive my gringoness. Diego Sequeira. Hopefully that's better for my Latino friends.
Throughout the country in support and asking for the return of Nicolás Maduro. Beyond the Chavista fray, if you will, people are, and this has been the case throughout all these months. I mean, we've been here like 5 months already. They basically don't support this kind of quote unquote resolutions, regardless if they support or not the government. Actually, in many cases.
So it's interesting because you see a lot of propaganda about how Venezuelans are in the streets, like cheering the U.S. revolution, like, yay, we did it, yay, you know, and I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I'm sure there are people doing that because the U.S. has a bunch of paid NGOs and like the National Endowment for Democracy embedded in those countries doing stuff like that. And Marco Rubio, this is a thing they talk about in here that I completely forgot. Marco Rubio runs USAID now. They kind of conveniently like swept that under the rug, but Marco Rubio is arguably more powerful than the president. Not only does he run the State Department, he also runs USAID. So he can basically, I mean, it's kind of an ingenious thing for the head of the State Department to be able to run that anyway, because it's the propaganda manipulation tool they use before they do war shit, which is what the State Department does these days. It used to be the Department of, yeah, anyway, let me just get finished. Let me shut up.
They just don't support, they don't like Nicolás Maduro, but they like far less for the U.S. to be taking over.
Just one more quick sidebar here. Imagine, like, as much as, say you hate Trump or you hate Biden or whatever, imagine if, like, Germany invaded the U.S. and replaced Biden with someone else. Like, even if you hated Biden, you'd be like, what the fuck, Germany? You can't just do that. You know, it's ridiculous. Of course, people are like, yeah, we didn't vote for Maduro, but he is from our country, and a lot of people did, so.
Especially after they bombed, and we had this nasty operation yesterday that, according to some, it took a total of 40 dead people, civilians and military. So thinking that people feel...
I don't know if they're saying that much in the mainstream media. I should probably watch some mainstream reports on this, but 40 dead, it's not a huge death toll, but it's not a good way to win hearts and minds.
Liberated or enthusiastic about what's going on, it's just a misrepresentation, and it's just spin. That's not the case right now, regardless of the uncertainty. But overall, I might say again, like it has been through the last 4 or 5 months with this pressure, with all the extrajudicial killings that we saw near our shores in the Caribbean, which also included the Colombians and Trinidadians, among others, and of course Venezuelans, fishermen or whatever, we just don't know because there's no evidence. The mood inside the country has been the same. And even according to the New York Times, it seems that Trump was actually pissed on the fact that Maduro was appearing in public and showing public dancing, and just having a very Caraqueño, very from Caracas kind of style, and that I think that is something that it seems it would disturb them a lot. And the same way that this calm, this defense of normalcy seems also to actually upset them.
So I wanted to show you this tape real quick. This is from Twitter. And Maduro is a hero now. This is Liger. Maduro is a hero now. He was mostly known for being the successor to Chavez, but now he's a martyr kidnapped by the great Satan. The world needs more humble bus drivers and way less pedophile hosts of The Apprentice. Can you argue with that? Maduro was famously a bus driver. I don't know if we can see here. Let's see the translation of this. This is from With impressive composure, Nicolas Maduro greets his kidnappers. Good night, Happy New Year, without fear, with balls in the very heart of the empire. Universal hero. So this is you're basically making this guy into even more of a hero than he is now with this operation. And that's the point he was just making.
Why is this? I've been saying this in a lot of occasions, but if you go through the think tank literature regarding the recommendations of what to do military against Venezuela and so on, they all recommend long-range attacks or this kind of the kind of infiltrations and special forces operation we saw last night, but no boots on the ground. But the ideal scenario in each and every of these papers is basically some breaking point inside Venezuela. They rely basically on us in order to do their bit. And I think that hasn't changed right now. And that's also why they had to do what they did with Nicolás Maduro yesterday, because there hasn't been any social breakdown. There hasn't been any unrest.
As I said earlier, the Juan Guaido route didn't work. They couldn't do their usual maneuvers. Brian Berlitic is the guy that, you know what, Truth? I've been watching Garland Nixon a lot more lately too. Garland Nixon's had some great shit. He always has Scott Ritter and Larry Johnson and a lot of those CIA guys too. But so going back to this guy's basically saying what I was saying earlier.
No breaking point, no turning point in the sense of.
About how the color revolution stuff isn't working on Venezuela. So they had to kind of jump into it head first if they wanted to do anything, because people just laughed Juan Guaido out of the scene last time they tried this. And then, if you remember, they sent mercenaries who were captured. And so this time, let's keep going. Because
people taking the streets in order to overthrow the government. So that's basically where we at right now. Regardless of uncertainty, regardless of concerns. I mean, people are worried, of course they are, but they're not crazy about it. I mean, they're not losing it. Yes, you can also find some TikTok posts of people celebrating. There is this minority, mostly a diaspora minority, by the way, people who are not in Venezuela. And within the diaspora, of course, there's also a segmentation. There's also a class structure there. These are the people who have access constantly to social media. If it was an actual Venezuelan pro, a pleb working in Colombia, in Spain, or whatever, they just don't have time to post crap on social media.
That's a great point. Working class people aren't on social media. So they're trying to convince us that this is some like organic thing when it's clearly an op, and we all know it. But let me jump up here because he talks a little bit more. He talks a little bit about what he calls the new robber barons, and I think he makes some really great points here that are worth discussing.
In which you have this new oligarchy, this new robber barons, the clout robber barons that are now ruling U.S. not right now. And for example, Operation Southern Spear, if you actually go through the document, it clearly shows how many unmanned vehicles, aerial or maritime, are being used to screen and to surveil the Caribbean. The same way, by the way, they have been doing in Gaza, because this is an extension of Gaza in that sense. I hope to God that it doesn't get to that point, but it's important to take this into account. This is fundamental here, because that's a new way of war, which is like a privatized package, which includes all this AI stuff with also mercenaries and a state effort, a state that absorbed executives from Meta, from Oracle, and from Palantir, if I'm not mistaken, that were absorbed by the U.S. Army and are now lieutenant colonels, which actually were AI executives. So this explains also the merge that is operating here right now, and also maybe how president was actually surveilled, regardless of all the spin they've been saying, all this, this pattern recognition and the daily routine and so on. I mean, they just bribe the crap out of someone in order to do this. It's no rocket science from my point of view, but the technological support, yes, it's definitely this guys, and also AI. It's energy demanding, it's intensive. So that also explains a lot. It's an angle of the whole resources in the Venezuelan oil research and whatnot, because of course this is one of the core reasons this is all happening, but not the only one.
Just to recap what he's saying there is, it's not just the oil. It's a whole new set of robber barons connected to, AI and Silicon Valley and all the kind of stuff that has taken off in recent years with the advent of the internet. So I want to jump up to he talks about how they got to Maduro a little more right here. And I thought this was...
those are great points, Diego. Exactly happened in this situation, how we should be looking at it, given that there is so much speculation right now that there's internal problems that ended up giving up Maduro, where you had maybe people close to him giving him up, which many are seeing as a possible omen, a bad omen toward what's to come. How would you communicate to people, who aren't living in Venezuela and who aren't witnessing this firsthand?
Well, first of all, I have to state clearly, I don't have any privileged information regarding this. I don't have any insider information to share or to use in this case. I don't know that. So and because I was as shocked as anyone else. So I have to tread carefully here, because I think still have some loose threads, right? That's why I'm heavily relying on what could have happened. Now, if you see the footage, there is no logical explanation for this low-flying helicopters to just hover over Caracas that easily. So that brings the question of who actually would allow that. But there's an important but here. They were jammed also. I mean, it was similar in a way to the first day of the Israeli attack on Iran back in June of last year, the 13th of June. So it probably follows that pattern as well. So my guess is a combination of all these things, as in electronic warfare, especially with all the hardware that was in near shores. I mean, you have all this boats and airplanes. I don't know the technicalities. I always forget the names. I've read them several times, but I always lose those names because they're just, it's just complicated. But they're specialized precisely in electronic warfare. So, and that was there obviously for a reason. I mean, with all this huge build-up armada in the Caribbean. So they definitely used those military assets and hardware for this operation. But I think, and now I'm falling into the speculative area, some sort of, inside job was happening. I don't believe the spin that the New York Times published yesterday, and also what the Hexeth and Rubio and Trump have been saying about how, that sophisticated infiltration operation and whatnot. I would guess it would be even more, petty than that. And so that's my guess right now. I cannot conclude anything yet. I think there's still information missing, but it was also to some extent, because if it was a crack within the security structures in the military, something else would be happening today. So far, I'm sorry, these are crappy headphones. And so far, it's not the case. So far as I know, I'm here talking to you. So I'm not sure what's going on at this exact moment in the rest of the country, but that is basically my guess. If it was a significant one, maybe something else would have been happening today, and that's not happening. So maybe it was to some extent, maybe it was stopped, maybe it was detected. I don't know, but also it involved. They say 40 dead just yesterday. By the way, also there are testimonies of young Venezuelan sergeants wounded that are alive that actually defended their own battalion back then. So it's not as clear cut as they say. So there's a lot of, I'm going to send them to you afterwards so you can do whatever you want with them. But these are at least 2 or 3 testimonies. There are, actually Telesur is running them, of these young Venezuelan sergeants that are basically telling their version of what they saw and what they did yesterday. And I think this is also important because this also goes through the narrative of a clear-cut, sophisticated operation. But we still have to wait a bit more. I mean, a couple of days. I'm not saying weeks, to see what else reaches the surface and helps us, get a decent frame of what actually happened. At least a closer approach, a closer picture to the reality of this all. And also, if that penetration, if that infiltration was that extensive, we would have had, I think, an actual power vacuum, an institutional crisis. And that's not the case so far.
So one of the other things they do here that I want to show you is they actually go over some clips from the mainstream media and respond to them. And like I said, it's always good to hear the perspective of someone who's from the country we're invading, who maybe isn't a bought and paid for United States asset. So
Hugo Chavez said it years and years ago, oil is a major reason, if not the biggest reason, for the U.S.'s desire to overthrow the Bolivarian government. Here is Marco Rubio.
Does the United States intend to secure the oil fields? Won't that take U.S. troops?
Well, ultimately, this is not about securing the oil fields. This is about ensuring that no sanctioned oil can come in and out until they make changes to the governance of that entire industry. Because right now, that industry is non-existent in the traditional way. These oil fields basically are pirate operations. People literally steal the oil from the ground. That's how they hold this regime together. A handful of cronies benefit from this oil, specific oil wells. They're producing at like 18% capacity.
A handful of. See, I love, again, the lack of self-awareness these people have. That's literally how the United States runs.
Because the equipment is all decrepit, and they basically pocket the money to their benefit. They sell the oil at a discount in global markets, 40 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, but all that money goes to them. Those oil fields have not benefited the people of Venezuela in over a decade. But they have made multi-millionaires, billionaires out of just a handful of people, and that's what.
See, and that's a complete lie, because their biggest beef with the Chavez regime and the Maduro continuation of that was the nationalization of a lot of the oil profits. They put it back into the coffers of the country instead of selling it off to the highest bidder, which is, again, we all know why this is happening.
That's what's held this regime together. That's what needs to be addressed. The way to address it to the benefit of the Venezuelan people is to get private companies that are not from Iran or somewhere else to go in, invest in the equipment that hasn't been invested in 20 years, because none of the profits that have been made from the oil have been reinvested. It's all been stolen. And that's going to take outside companies that come in and know how to do that. The people who do this stuff will know how to do it. But it all begins with dramatic changes at the way on the way that the authorities that are in charge of that industry behave. And
so, Diego, they're going to Marco Rubio essentially wants private U.S. companies to come in to process and refine Venezuelan oil, supposedly, but needs changes in the governance to do so. It sounds very familiar, but it's very much out there. React to this. Talk about, what's going on here, and what are the implications and the impact, because Rubio and company are seeing this as a very smooth process that's, over and done with. How do you see it?
Done, yeah. First of all, what a sleazy, disingenuous way to describe what's going on with the Venezuelan oil industry. Ever since in August the 24th of 2017, the oil industry was sanctioned, which actually dropped the oil revenue back in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, down to 99% loss. They did bring it over to collapse back then, and they didn't succeed, man. And I think that's important here. And also talking about the piracy and all that BS that he says there.
Yeah, so that's the other reason. That's a good point. The sanctions weren't working because Venezuela was just selling their oil to China and Russia instead. So they're like, all right, fuck you, Europe. We'll sell to other people. And that's why, again, these guys are like, no, you can't sell your oil to anyone you want. We get to say who you can and can't sell it to, or we'll just take it for ourselves.
Venezuela is a country that has to circumvent and overcome so many unjust, illegal restrictions on their oil industry and in our oil trade in order to survive. So one of the main reasons that a way to understand this better is this explains the raids we saw in the tankers back then. And they also realized also what a waste of resources and how hard it was, especially when the Vela 1 wasn't actually intercepted. They weren't able to. The U.S. Coast Guard just didn't succeed. Their third attempt. So maybe they realized it wasn't that successful. But even more so, which is more important, one of the pressing reasons all of this happened is precisely because Venezuela, first of all, last month it closed with 1,200,000 barrels production, which it's not top notch, but it also explains the recovery. Venezuela has not collapsed economically because it was able to diversify in a very, very, very strongly with strong limitations, in order to not rely so heavily on oil revenue, because that was the Venezuela's history. And it shows, which is more sensitive and important, that the sanctions program basically failed, and that there is what they call a shadow fleet of sorts moving around the globe, operated by, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, whatever, that shows that they are able to keep trading their oil. Yes, of course this brings opacity, and of course this also brings corruption, but I cannot think of a more corrupt thing than sanctions themselves, which is a massive grift by itself already.
Yep. So I just want to say something on an optimistic tip here, because to me what this desperation signifies, this desperation on behalf of like oil companies, is the world is changing, and you see the same kind of what's the best way to describe this? It's kind of like flailing, right? You've seen this same dynamic with a lot of other industries, specifically entertainment recently, like Hollywood just flailing, like, how do we adapt to this? Oil is becoming less and less necessary. and I think a lot of people are becoming less and less dependent on, or becoming a lot more kind of wise to the reality that a lot of these companies and these chemical products, from food companies to oil companies to entertainment companies, have infected our lives in ways that and realizing that we really don't need them, especially with the advent of the internet, which is why they're looking to control that, which is a whole other thing. But I think this is how this same dynamic plays out in an industry like big oil, who has historically, for ages, since the days of like John Rockefeller, had control of the government of the United States. So of course it's like, the dying gasp of a dying, control mechanism, really. And I'm interested to see how this plays out, because I don't, much like Iraq, we'll be greeted as liberators and all that stuff. I don't see it going as well as they hope it is going to. Now, that said, on the bright side, it wasn't a long-term, it's not a long-term war yet, and not a lot of people have died. So, but we'll see how it plays out. But again, I'm optimistic because of this kind of dynamic that I see playing out within, just the world in general, with just the population going like, oh, really? It's not going to be long before even money is almost meaningless. You know what I mean? I kind of see things trending that way. And that really is the control mechanism for all of this, because it's very easy to just throw money at a person or a thing and it'll go away. You can buy silence pretty easily if you have enough money to pay everyone, as we have clearly seen throughout a lot of these, things coming to light over the last several years that our government and our corrupt officials have been doing, in the age of, I would call it the age of transparency with the internet, where authenticity and honesty is the real currency. And so just to summarize that little rant, I do see this as, even though it's kind of a bump in the road, we're trending in a direction where these kind of elements are losing control and they're kind of showing their hand here. So just to prove positive that what this is about, these guys talk right here about the evidence that this is being done on behalf of corporate interests. This is a little bit more of this.
Maduro was kidnapped. We had Wall Street Journal reporting that 20 business leaders, including some from the top hedge funds and asset managers, are preparing to go on a March trip to Venezuela to look at investment opportunities there, including in energy and hold on one second. This always happens. It's the wrong video. All right, let me start this again. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting that we have investment opportunities being looked at by 20 business leaders of the top hedge fund and asset managers who are preparing to go to Venezuela in March, Diego, to look at investment opportunities, including in energy and infrastructure. And this gets to what you were talking about with regard to ExxonMobil. That's quite the presumption. Saying that they're going in March appears to indicate that regime change is not only in order, but it's already finished, and that by March, they will be waltzing in looking to do exactly as you said ExxonMobil wants to do.
Yeah, one more time, you cannot hide timing. There you go. I mean, that reveals their planning, their quote-unquote strategic planning or tactical at this level. But that proves that they actually are stating that it is a given that by March, everything will be under their control. And I think that's quite crazy. And I think it's quite neoconish, by the way, to think that you're going to shape up reality as easily to predict from this point up to that point without taking a lot of variance in consideration. So that's quite descriptive. And mind you, it's not only the oil. We have the fourth largest gold reserves in the world. We have also iron ore. We have rare earths. We have gas, the largest gas reserves in the hemisphere. So it's about resources, of course, but you have to add the rest to this, which is, of course, first, it's also about punishing a population. It's also about punishing and domesticating the options. Us decided, in the path we decided to go forward in, because it goes against precisely this hegemony rationale. Because back until, I think, 2012, I think the first oil buyer of Venezuela was the United States. It wasn't anyone else. But they have to overthrow and they have to do what they did, and Rubio had to do what he did. in order to find the moment in which they have the unrestricted access to the resources, because it's not about under Venezuelan terms, under Venezuelan sovereign terms, which of course brings us to the ahistorical, ignoramus, stupid, counterfactual justification they're saying about the Venezuelan taking their oil and their assets and whatnot. This is just stupid. And of course, this level of stupidity and ignorance, it's Stephen Miller's bid, who's also a very active operator here, saying all that BS. Because Venezuela went through a first nationalization in 1976, and it was Venezuelan labor who actually built all this, regardless of capital. And everyone was really happy with that nationalization because it was in their own terms, and it also guaranteed that Venezuela will always be following the line, towing the line. Actually, during the 90s, then the whole privatization stream, reprivatization.
The U.S., as they do in many countries, started buying their oil as a control mechanism, and then when they start acting a way that we don't like them to act, then we can go, oh, we're going to take away that money from you. That money that enriched your country is now going to be gone. I keep turning my sunglasses. And we do this in a ton of countries. We do this all the time. But at the end of the day, the real question is this: who is going to stop? Who's going to stop us? You know. And I thought of this from an episode of The Simpsons way back in the day. There's like a real quick shot of Homer wearing this T-shirt, and I think about this way more than I probably should. But it's kind of the state of the world right now when you really think about it. So in this next bit, he's going to talk a little bit about what I said earlier about how this is really a lot about China and adversaries of the United States having access to oil from our hemisphere.
Iran that are also spurring this operation. Here is Marco Rubio on Meet the Press.
Need to take
again. Did this again. I just cannot stand this new format. Here we go. I think it'll work now.
The Venezuelan oil industry. States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela since 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants is? The number one fear that Brazil has, that Colombia has, that all these countries in the region have about what's happening in Venezuela and our involvement is they're afraid of another mass migration event. That's what they fear. This is deeply destabilizing stuff.
So, Diego, some would say...
he doesn't bring the U.S. on that list of people that could receive a mass migration?
So Marco Rubio and people in his circle, those who back him, are the reasons why so many people migrated out of Venezuela, or at least created the economic conditions for some of that migration. But I wanted to ask your... some people have said, oh, well, he's just fear-mongering about Russia, China, Iran, in order to justify the regime change in Venezuela. Is it just that, or is this bigger? What's your take on, and what is the view from Venezuela about its role in these relationships with what Marco Rubio calls U.S. adversaries?
They always try to stress like Venezuela is not that relevant, or the Venezuela is not that serious, or whatever. But it's proven one more time that Venezuela is actually defining the foreign policy in the hemisphere. So that's as sensitive as it gets in that sense. The other things are just psyop kind of content. And I was, before joining you here on your show.
But again, he also just confirmed what I said about them trying to control the flow of oil. And what's ironic about this is it really is the sanctions thing is not working, because we sanctioned them and put them in poverty, and then they just started selling their oil to Russia, China, and India, whatever other countries they're selling it to. And so they were able to continue, with their socialist regime, nationalized. And that's a no-no for the U.S. We can't allow that. especially if we're going back to the Reagan era. I mean, this is like was a hallmark policy of the Reagan era, where they just had to go and mess with countries that had quote unquote socialist leaders who wanted to share oil profits that the country had with the citizens and not make it a boon for oligarchs, basically.
So I was on a very annoying EUA channel with a very unacceptable ignoramus from the think tank world or the U.S. academia from Florida that was saying that Venezuela was a gateway to the region, and which is true. Actually, it is. And not only the gateway, Venezuela is the bulwark also, and also is the most proactive country here in the political sense of being, audacious enough to create and to contribute to the new system, the new possibilities that are happening in the world with the big Eurasian players. And also, while I hate I think it's a misnomer to call it the pink tide, but whatever, we can use it now because your audience is mostly from the US, so they can understand it easily. But Venezuela was the one that prevailed, including Cuba and Nicaragua, by the way. None of them sexy enough for that, that gorge divan, that left that actually ruled out anything that's not up to their expectations.
So I want to show you one last piece of this where they show another angle to this story, another angle to this kind of, kidnapping and this regime change effort, another important angle. And this is actually very interesting. Let's write about here.
Zero-sum situation, which is basically what the U.S. and Europe does up to this point. And now it's even worse, because this comes with what it seems to be the political economy against multipolarity, which is basically genocide, as Gaza has been showing.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Europe. I covered this earlier. The way that Europe has reacted to this has been absolutely lapdoggish to the United States, with not only no pushback, but enthusiastic support. But I wanted to that point of
it's ironic that look at Europe showing how hypocritical they are too. Like, when Putin does it, it's a terrible thing. We need to freak out about it. When Putin does something like this to defend his sovereignty, he's the most terrible person. But when Trump just goes in to literally rob a country of oil, we're on board with it. Probably because their European companies will share in the profits. So they're like, let's just keep our mouths shut and support this. And I think that's why you also have, again, these are the fakest people alive, but I wanted to take a quick browse through that. This is kind of an interesting sidebar for you here. The rightful president of Venezuela is Maria Corina Machado. The U.S. needs to be negotiating with the Venezuelan military to support her installation in power. She was elected by the people and denied the position illegally. Is that a fact? Free Venezuela. And this is from January 3rd. That's interesting. He must have protected his tweets or something, because I'm not logged in, so I had to Google to find this. Anyhow, let's get back to a Venezuelan journalist here, Diego.
Of these, the rationality here. I wanted to actually bring up, let me see if I can find it. Here it is. When it comes to the Israel question, there's a lot of people who are seeing what's happening in Latin America. There's a broad, I think, a push to install compliant regimes to the United States. And Venezuela is now the biggest target. Here is General Jack Keane talking. He made a little bit of a Freudian slip with regard to Israel. And I know you've been looking at this, and Delcy Rodriguez said this operation has a Zionist tinge to it. So here is General Jack Keane on Fox News with the Freudian slip.
The implications here are really great for the...
Hold on. I don't know what is going on with StreamYard, but here we go.
The implications here are really great for the Venezuelan people.
Did you hear that? The Israel.
What? Where did the video go? Okay, so the video didn't download all the way. It seems like.
Yeah, but
you just didn't see.
Yeah, but I get it. I mean, I don't know if you're aware now of the Isaac Accords.
Yes. Yeah. Continue, please.
Well. Yeah, it's about that. It's to expand the global censorship and also the protection of the entity throughout the hemisphere. And already Argentina, I think Costa Rica, Bolivia, I think, the new Bolivia, and others already, in Panama, already subscribed this, which is basically a replication, a stupid one, a lamest one from the Abraham Accords. And it's just the same initiative because of the same reasons. Because once Israel is a narrative-reliant entity, and once the narrative is compromised, this is what you get. And funny enough, because there's no way to...
A narrative-reliant entity. I like that terminology. This guy speaks better English than a lot of people who English is their first language. That's a very astute observation.
To go back and act differently, censorship, AI censorship, social media censorship is the way to go. And of course, security operations and security cooperation and so forth. I mean, the Israelis were very important, for example, in communications, logistics during the Condor operation. This was revealed like 10 years ago. And also the kind of grip they have on the region. And because of the same reasons, resources, power, projection, and control. And that's not different here, you know. Based on their own interests, and sometimes, as you are very well aware of, goes against the United States itself. So I think that, and also, mind you, there's no diplomatic relationship between Israel and Venezuela since 2009, since Operation Cast Lead. So that's also, they have also their own scores there to settle, just like Exxon, from the same time, by the way.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I mean, I believe Israeli media interviewed Corina Machado.
Oh yes, and she said they were going to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem, and then in 2018 she asked for cooperation, military cooperation, included with the Likud party, with written directly to Netanyahu.
And I want to show you this if you haven't seen it, but a lot of you probably have. This is just more evidence to back what these guys are kind of saying here. This is how good guys speak. Missiles are destroying civilians' homes in Gaza, killing women and children, and the same is happening in Beirut and southern Lebanon. Where is the International Court of Justice? This is from January 3rd.
Cada vez que cae un misil de alta precisión sobre un edificio de apartamentos en Gaza y mata hombres, mujeres y niños, cada vez que cae un misil sobre Beirut o sobre el sur del Líbano, esos misiles incendian y destruyen el sistema de Naciones Unidas. ¿Dónde está la Corte Internacional de Justicia? ¿O es que fue creada solo para perseguir a los países del sur? ¿Dónde está el sistema de justicia de Naciones Unidas? Solo para sacar documentos, comunicados, y la vida de los niños y niñas de Palestina no valen.
So there you go. I mean, let me let him finish here.
Alcemos con fuerza la voz y busquemos un plan práctico también, audaz, para una refundación del sistema de Naciones Unidas que agoniza ante el surgimiento de corrientes nazis y fascistas a lo largo de esta coyuntura histórica tan dolorosa.
So there you go right there. That is why Maduro is bad guy number one in South America, because he's not adhering to the proper narrative. And I just want to show you some of the kind of responses to this. Specifically, the response of one Nick Fuentes. And this is actually very well done, kind of TikTok style video that breaks down. You know, the more I see of Fuentes, the more I'm like, okay, maybe this guy is the op that everyone thinks he is. He does say some really intelligent stuff. And I think, I played some clips with him last week talking about the populist left and right uniting. But again, to Kurt Metzger summed it up so well. It seems like he's one of those guys who they're trying to get his stink on people that are close to the truth. And so the fact that he's coming out saying the type of things that I've been saying for years about, the populist left and right uniting on an issue by issue basis, or, now all of a sudden you can associate those viewpoints with someone who's an anti-Semite. And so I think that's the kind of the point that Kurt was making when it comes to that. But let me show you this, because this is actually, it's about 1 minute and 30 seconds, but this guy kind of breaks down Fuentes' response to the Maduro capture and why it's suspect.
By U.S. military forces just a day. The president of Venezuela was captured by U.S. military forces just a day ago, and Nick Fuentes has already changed his position on it like 3 times. At first, he was celebrating and saying that we should just go in and take Venezuela's oil. But then when he realized that was extremely unpopular, he came out and said the opposite. Originally, I thought invading Venezuela was a good thing, but this new policy of running Venezuela ourselves sounds like a massive overcommitment. I have zero confidence in this nation-building project. What did you think they were going to do? What was the alternative to the U.S. staying there and occupying Venezuela just like they did in Iraq? This is what we told you was going to happen from the beginning, you moron. The only other option would have been for the U.S. to topple their government and leave like they did in Libya. And you know what happened in Libya? Millions of immigrants fled to Western Europe. Aren't you Mr. Anti-Immigration? Don't you blame immigrants for all of our country's problems? Why do you want to create more immigrants by destroying the country of Venezuela and just leaving? Another forever war was the only option here. And you know who was saying that from the beginning? Me. But you're too much of a dumbass grifter who just goes wherever the wind blows to actually take a principled position on this. So you keep flip-flopping and showing everybody how much of a clown and a liar you are. A wolf in sheep's clothing and potentially a federal government psyop in order to keep Americans in line, to keep them supporting endless war in the U.S. empire. This kid is a rat. If you like Nick Fuentes, you like a catboy rat. Congrats.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but you know, it's like anything. You know, people are multidimensional, and people hate to admit that, but not everyone's going to see everything the same way or the way that you do, and that's something I think you have to deal with and meet people where they are on certain things. You know, and in the case of a Nick Fuentes, it's suspect because his whole thing is America first, and people are starting to see through these kind of fakes. And I think, again, it's why Candace Owens is so popular, or Joe Rogan is so popular, because despite them kind of maybe having opinions that aren't well informed sometimes, they'll own it and they'll admit they were wrong, or they'll come around to the right. Same with Tucker Carlson. He's been out there in front of this for a long time, and it's why he has the audience he does, because people know that he's at least being honest, even if he's not. Even if they don't always agree with him, or he's not always right about every single detail out of the gate. And I saw a lot of reactions to, you know, what people said about Candace Owens. Basically, she's just putting out data for people to look at. She's not making claims one way or another. And you can't really, you know, the people are trying to attack the person instead of the questions, which is, you know, obviously makes it clear that it's a op. But and Nick Fuentes, like, you know, you see it with Alex Jones. Wow, there has been some really epic kind of self-immolations this past year, but you love to see it. You know, poor Alex, that guy can't catch a break. You know, he's out here talking about Candace Owens weaving conspiracy theories. Is like, Alex, do you have any self-awareness whatsoever? Like, you're the one example I would use of free speech. And I always said this, where, yeah, free speech should be absolute. People should be able to say whatever they want. However, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequences. So you can shout fire in a crowded theater, but you're going to get arrested, right? You can say untrue things, but you're going to get sued for libel. And in the case of Alex Jones, to me, he's an example of the system working the way it was intended to work. You know, he went over he crossed the line, and he got what he deserved, really, you know? So Fuentes, again, he has some good takes, but I'm still skeptical. And I just want to close out today by showing you the results of this. But also, first of all, you know, this is a neocon war because of who they've been trotting out to defend it. And this is very interesting here, if you haven't seen this. This is the guy, and I'll just let Max Blumenthal here kind of sum this up for you, as he eloquently does. They brought out the Bush torture memo guy, who openly argued that no law or treaty could stop a U.S. president from ordering the crushing of a child's testicles to extract a confession from their parent. Former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney John Yoo disputes Kane's underpinning point that this was an act of war requiring congressional authorization. I don't know if we need to listen to all of this, but let's.
Senator Tim Kaine, for instance, who we just spoke to, who are decrying this as an act of war without congressional approval. Does it constitute?
Well, again, would Tim Kaine be saying this if Kamala had won and was at the top of this? No, he would not.
Constitute an act of war because granted, it's not often that executing an arrest warrant results in toppling a government, but at the same time, most of the Western world does not recognize Maduro as a legitimate head of state.
That's an excellent question, Jackie. And I got to say, I just think Senator Kaine was just flat wrong. And I question whether these critics of President Trump today are being principled, because presidents of both parties have done this for decades. I just mentioned 1989 President George H.W. Bush.
That makes it
President Clinton in Serbia waged an air war and ultimately led to the overthrow and trial of Slobodan Milosevic. Right? President Obama used force, and with Senator Kaine's running mate in the presidential election, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State at the time, used force to overthrow and kill the dictator in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. So this is a tradition that's gone on for a long time. In all those cases, Congress was not required under the Constitution to give some kind of authorization. Look, if Senator Kaine and other members of Congress want to stop this, they have plenty of tools at their disposal. They can cut off funding immediately. That's how the Vietnam War ended. Or they could impeach a president that they think is waging a bad war. They're welcome to try that. I don't think they have the support in Congress. So it's easier for them to try to escape responsibility, but continue also to fund, I got to say, the amazing military, the only kind in the world that could carry out such a decisive and speedy operation like the one we saw 2 days ago.
So there you have it. The neocons have realigned, and we're back in the early 2000s, folks. We are back in the early 2000s once again. And so I think to close out today, I want to show you two other pieces of video. And the first is this one from Professor Zenkis. Trump's Venezuela move was perfectly calculated. Whatever part of the world didn't already hate us now can't fucking stand us. Well done. Here's protesters burning the American flag in Paris de la République in protest of the U.S. military intervention. And on the other side of the pond here in America, you have this dynamic happening. Massive protest in New York this weekend. Now, as much as I love this kind of protest and stuff, I'm not sure exactly what it changes. Does it do any good? I don't know. I did see some comments on some of my favorite streamers' shows, though, recently that gave me a little bit of hope in that they kind of were right and left people pushing for another massive unite the right and left type event around the cause of anti-war. And if there's any kind of silver lining to stuff like this, you can see that the MAGA base does not approve, and the real left does not approve, and the people that have been consistently anti-war, whether they're on the right or the left, do not approve. So we at least have that dynamic going for us. But the propaganda and the ability to use propaganda as a tool of manipulation is stronger than ever. And as I said earlier, this is something I forgot about. Marco Rubio controls USAID. So the guy who has had a chip on his shoulder for Latin America, these Latin American countries for a long time, is one, I forget what they call them, the anti-Chavistas or whatever. All the Cubans and Latinos in Miami who run with the rich crowd, and there's also a large Zionist population in Florida, and now political power resides there. So it does make sense from that standpoint that this is the project that they're going to focus on, because a lot of the constituents who are closest to them are, this is one of the projects that they hold near and dear. And so just beware, be careful, watch out for the propaganda, and do your best to decipher what's true. That's what I do. Like I said, the Trump thing has been a big disappointment so far. But again, still the lesser of two evils, despite that. Even if it's just for people like Tim Kaine pushing back on these kind of regime change wars. And where is Tulsi Gabbard? I need to make a meme. Like, where's Tulsi? It's like, where's Waldo amidst all this? She's just kind of hiding in the background. And so she's someone who I've also long kind of supported and vouched for, and not really vouched for, but just kind of hoped for the best, like hoped that her actual, values and principles would kind of be at the forefront of this new administration, which is clearly not the case. And I did see her tweet something out about aloha recently, like some cute little like feel good Hallmark thing where it's like, yay, I'm so thankful, aloha. And it's like, yeah, dude, I don't know what people expect from her. Do you expect her to resign and protest? Would that make any difference? Would it be more of a help to have a voice like that there? I don't know the answer to these questions, but I think they're valid questions. And I think I would probably lean towards the latter, that despite her not kind of standing up at this particular moment, I mean, maybe she was bulldozed. It sounds from all reports like she was, but despite that, just having a person with a historical conscience in that role, and even just for having her in that role for the comeuppance against Hillary Clinton and the people who smeared her as a Russian agent, I think is good. So, you take what you can get. It's kind of a lot of people forget that the world is not going to ever work exactly the way you want it to, no matter how loud you scream. So you kind of have to take these events as what they are, as the world kind of rolling the way it's going to roll, and roll with the punches. Because I know when I saw this news about the Venezuela thing, it was like an arrow through my heart. I was just like, man, not again. Really? We're going to keep doing this? But I see it as the gasp of a dying empire. And on that note, I'm going to take you out today with a throwback to the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And I don't know if you remember this. A lot of you in my circles do. But there was a massive anti-war rally with the likes of Max Blumenthal and the Do Dissidents kids. And, I call them kids. They're Russ is my age or older. Keaton's a couple years younger than me. But, all the kind of like a really good who's who of kind of right-leaning and left-leaning anti-war people at that event. And the level of propaganda around it was so hilarious that even Rachel Maddow kind of really jumped the shark, to the point where I made this parody video that I'm going to show you. And like a dumbass, I had it queued up and then I closed the tab it was in. But this whole dynamic was just so funny to me to watch, and Rachel Maddow is someone who I used to watch religiously, she was one of my favorites. And so it was depressing over the edge, but it was also hilarious. And so I put together this liberal boogeyman federal agent remix to just kind of make fun of the anti-war propaganda, anti-war propaganda. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me today. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, as always. And you'll probably see me throwing out a lot more vids these days. I'm back in my groove with the editing process, so I'm trying to get stuff out on a more frequent basis, trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark when I get there, I've said multiple times, I will probably start doing streams without my glasses on here and there, but I like the glasses too. I kind of like you not being able to see my eyes because sometimes I'm really high and they're kind of red and droopy. So, it's really more that than anything. Same reason I'm not trying to hide the fact that I'm bald, but I don't like the way the light shines on my bald head. So I like to wear the beanie. Who knows? Maybe in the future that'll change too. Maybe I'll get better lighting and I'll start wearing a tie and all that. But for now, it is what it is. This is what I'm comfortable with. And I thank you all for joining me. And I'm going to take you out today with this little nugget of political humor and parody, my Rachel Maddow Federal Agent remix. Thank you again. I got mad love for y'all. And stay safe out there. See you next time.
And I mean truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags. At least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. Anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson. Cryptocurrency promoters. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one. But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were Proud Boys there. Anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson. There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. People with Russian flags. There were Proud Boys there.